Come on.
It's recorded. I'll just minimise that, and then we'll have a little.
Get a good one shot.
Make me nervous now.
That's
We'll leave it at that for now. I will practice. Thanks.
Go as a wall.
Okay, I'm going to remove this as well, because this isn't great to be in any video.
Don't put it on.
Right, okay. This Torah portion is called Naso. It's the longest Torah portion in the entire thing. Don't worry, I found some ways of cutting out bits that are repetitive, so it shouldn't drag on. Right, first bit is about the Levites and how they were camped. Basically, they were camped in 3 sections, and then one of the sections had the sons of Aaron within it, so that formed a little subsection. So there's the Gershonites, the Merarites, the Kohathites, and then the Kohanim, which were part of the Kohathites, but they were Aaron's sons specifically, so they were the priests basically. They were the ones that did the temple service. They were the ones that sacrificed all the animals. They were split up into the 3 camps: the family of Kohath, the family of Gershon, the family of Merari, and those 3 camps represented mind or soul, body, and the spirit. And the service that they did represented each one of those things. They were camped around the Mishkan, basically, in a formation that separated the people of Israel from the tabernacle. So they formed like a barrier around it, basically. And the camp of Israel were a mile away. And the Levite camps were directly around the tabernacle. They guard the tabernacle. Okay. Now when they pitched camp and when they journeyed, they do it in a specific formation as well. Like the camp of Israel were in a specific formation, like the north, south, east and west, then the Levites were exactly the same. So they would camp and pitch exactly the same, but smaller, like a smaller version of the main camp. They surrounded the Mishkan. Now each of them had a particular task when they were travelling. Now the Kohathites were descendants of Levi's son Kohath, and they were in charge of the sacred objects in the tabernacle. They were in charge of things like the moving the Ark of the Covenant, the bronze laver and the menorah, the inside things, and they were associated with the mind or the soul because they carried the Ark, and within the Ark was the commandments. All of the Levites in general were involved in teaching and instructing about the evil intent, as they called it. So they would teach how to recognise that, how to stop it affecting your life, basically. But the Kohathites, the bits that they did were specifically involved with the mind, just because they moved the tablets of stone with the wisdom and the instructions on. Now the Gershonites, they carried the outside of the tabernacle, basically, the woven fabrics. They were said to carry the bits of the tabernacle that trembled, because their camp represented the spirit, and it's the spirit that trembles at God. So there was the mind of the Kohathites, there was the spirit of the Gershonites, and the Merarites were in charge of all of the wood inside of the tabernacle. They represented the body, the planks and the boards and the sockets, the things that actually made up the solid physical. Because the body doesn't tremble at God, the body is not fearful of God. It's only when the spirit is involved that there's a fear of God, and that brings the body, which is corrupted by sin, that brings that into line basically. But when there's the body without any action of the spirit, then there's no fear of God and sin rules basically. They camped on the different sides. The Kohanim camped on the south side, the Gershonites on the west, the Merari on the north, and the Kohanim, part of the Kohathites, actually camped on the east side. So as I said, they blocked the camp of Israel basically from the holiest place. They formed a barrier around it. And when the Levites weren't moving the stuff, that was their job when they were moving the stuff. When they weren't doing that, they had three particular tasks. They helped the Kohanim in cleaning the animals for sacrifice. They guarded the Mishkan, and also they were the musicians and the singers. When the sacrifices were going on, the Kohanim were doing that, and they'd have Levite musicians and singers actually playing music while they did it. Now, Gershon means, it's translated as chase away, and the idea behind that, they were responsible for the bits of the nefesh, or the soul, which would tremble at God. So the idea was that the evil intent could still influence your life basically, but that the spirit was there to chase away the influence of the evil intent. So you've got the body, which on its own would be subject to sin, and then you've got the spirit, which the job of the spirit is to chase away the evil intent. I'll start from Numbers 21. It says, Yahweh spoke to Moses, take a census of the Gershonites also by their ancestral house and by their clans. Record them from the age of 30 years up to the age of 50. All who are subject to service in the performance of the tasks for the tent of meeting. These are the duties of the Gershonite clans as to labour and porterage. They shall carry the cloths of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, with its covering of dolphin skins that is on top of it, and the screen for the entrance of the tent of meeting, the hangings of the enclosure, the screen at the entrance of the gate of the enclosure that surrounds the tabernacle, the cords thereof, and the altar, and all their service equipment and all their accessories, and they shall perform the service. All the duties of the Gershonites, all their porterage, and all their service shall be performed on orders from Aaron and his sons. You shall make them responsible for attending to all their porterage. Those are the duties of the Gershonite clans for the tent of meeting. They shall attend to them under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron, the priest. So everything that they did was under the direction of Ithamar, and he was one of the Kohanim, he was one of Aaron's sons. It was the same with the Merari as well. Everything that they did, all of their carrying of the tabernacle, that was all under the direction of this guy called Ithamar. Merari was the other clan of the Levites, and that's from the root bitter. That's what it means. The root of the word Merari means bitter, and they were responsible for the parts of the tabernacle which corresponded to the body. And the idea basically was that the Yetzer, as it was called, the evil intent, that would affect the body primarily, but there would be a struggle and a battle, as Paul talks about the struggle with the body in Romans. That was the idea. The Yetzer would try and infiltrate, but there would be a struggle and a battle against it. In Romans 8, Romans 7 through 8. Verse 29 says, As for the Merarites, you shall record them by the clans of their ancestral house. You shall record them from the age of 30 years up to the age of 50, all who are subject to service in the performance of the duties for the tent of meeting. These are their porterage tasks in connection with the various duties for the tent of meeting: the planks, the bars, the posts and the sockets of the tabernacle, the posts around the enclosure and their sockets, pegs and cords, all these furnishings and their service. You shall list them by name, the objects that are their porterage tasks. Those are the duties of the Merarite clans, pertaining to the various duties in the tent of meeting under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron the priest. And there's a diagram there which just shows the descendants from Levi. They're the three clans: Gershonites, the Kohathites and the Merari. And it just says underneath them what they were responsible for carrying. You can see that Aaron, who is the great grandson of Levi, you can see that he actually comes from the line of Kohath. That's the Kohanim who did the service in the temple. There's another diagram underneath. This shows how they were camped, basically. You've got the Mishkan in the centre. To the north were the Merari, 3,200 of them. To the west, the Gershonites, 2,630. South, Kohathites, 2,750. And then to the east is Aaron and his sons. And the next part of the Torah portion is about their enrolment. So I'll read the first bit. It says, "So Moses, Aaron and the chieftains of the community recorded the Kohathites by the clans of their ancestral house, from the age of 30 years up to the age of 50, all who were subject to service for work relating to the tent of meeting. Those recorded by their clans came to 2,750. That was the enrolment of the Kohathite clans, who all those who performed duties relating to the tent of meeting, whom Moses and Aaron recorded at the command of Yahweh through Moses. The Gershonites, there was 2,630 of them from the age of 30 to 50 who were subject to work. The Merarites were 3,200, and in total there was 8,580 of them that met the requirements. Now, the next part is about Tamai. So when you go to Numbers 5, the beginning of there. Now this talks about those that were unclean. One of the reasons that they were unclean that's mentioned is the Shon Hara, and that was gossiping. So you've got the physical example there of if someone was gossiping, they would receive Sirat, which was the leprosy. But that's a picture of the spiritual example of the body would have the eruption, as it puts it in this, of the leprosy. Well, that's an example of the spiritual, where the spiritual body suffers from gossip and the Shon Hara, basically the evil tongue or the evil inclination as part of that. So Numbers 5 says, Yahweh spoke to Moses saying, "Instruct the Israelites to remove from camp anyone with an eruption or a discharge, or anyone defiled by a corpse." Now, where it says eruption there, the word in Hebrew is actually zerah, so it's talking about zerat. Discharge, it's talking about a wet dream, say something that happens at night, the discharge that would make someone unclean, and obviously being defiled by a corpse. Now, the discharge would mean that someone had to just be removed from the camp of the Kohathites, because they were in charge of the purification of the mind, basically, and it showed an impurity in the mind. It showed an evil thought in the mind. It was happening at night, but it was a part of the lust, part of the imagination. So they would be removed from that specific camp. So the Levites' purpose was to teach and demonstrate what was called Ser Merah, and it was the avoidance of evil and impurity. One of these impurities was contact with a dead person. If someone had contact with a dead person, they were sent out of the camp of Levi. So all of these laws here, they refer specifically to the camp of the Levites. There are laws that refer to the camp of Israel in general, but these specific laws are talking about the camp of the Levites. Verse 3 says, remove male and female alike, put them outside the camp, so that they do not defile the camp of those in whose midst I dwell. So again, it's the Levites, which is the camp of Israel, where a mile off, the ones in whose midst the Lord dwelled, where his presence was above the ark. They were the Levites, so it specifies it's the Levites here. The Israelites did so, putting them outside the camp, as Yahweh had spoken to Moses, so the Israelites did. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelites, when a man or woman commits any wrong toward a fellow man, thus breaking faith with Yahweh, and that person realizes his guilt, he shall confess the wrong that he has done. He shall make restitution in the principal amount, and add 1/5 to it, giving it to him whom he is wronged. So in Leviticus 6, 1-7, it lays out this procedure in the case of theft, where it says that an extra 20% has to be paid to make restitution. But at this point, two new matters are introduced. The thief is required to pay 1/5, and it's when he's incriminated by two witnesses. That was when they were guilty of theft or any other crime. It had to be two witnesses. But the actual paying an extra 1/5, that didn't come into play until they had confessed their fault themselves. So they could be convicted by two witnesses, but until they actually said, yeah, I've done that, then they didn't have to pay the extra 1/5. So it was basically, it was a show of faith. If you have faith in Yahweh and you believe in Yahweh, then you're going to want to follow his law for the sake of that alone. But especially among thieves, if someone has to pay an extra 20% and they have to say, I've done it or I haven't done it, then it's only the people who really believe that are going to say, look, I've done it, and pay the extra 20%. It's between them and Yahweh. And the second thing that's introduced is if something is stolen from someone, or any damages are caused towards that person at all, and they're not around anymore, say they're dead, and they haven't got any kinsmen to whom the restitution can be made, the restitution still has to be made to Yahweh. So what the restitution had to be given to the priests. There's three elements to this. There's the confession of the wrongdoing, so they have to say that they're wrong. Restitution is made, so that's the principal amount and the extra 20%. And then atonement actually has to be made as well. There's an offering of a ram that's specified. Verse 8 says, if the man has no kinsman to whom restitution can be made, the amount repaid shall go to Yahweh for the priest, in addition to the ram of expiation with which expiation is made on his behalf. So too, any gift among the sacred donations that the Israelites offer shall be the priest's, and each shall retain his sacred donations. Each priest shall keep what is given to him. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelite people and say to them. Right, so this part is the law of jealousy. This is what happened when someone suspected that their spouse had been unfaithful. They were brought before the priest, basically. Or it was done in a case where, say, there wasn't enough witnesses in order to say to a court that this had happened, then they'd be brought in front of the priest, and this procedure would be gone through. It says, if any man's wife has gone astray and broken faith with him, in that a man has had carnal relations with her, unbeknown to her husband, and she keeps secret the fact that she has defiled herself without being forced, and there is no witness against her, but a fit of jealousy comes over him, and he is wrought up about the wife who has defiled herself, or if a fit of jealousy comes over one, and he is wrought up about his wife, although she has not defiled herself. Okay, so what would happen is the husband would bring the wife in front of the priest, and they would have to bring an offering. This offering was different to the usual grain offering that was offered, because the usual offering was wheat, oils and spices. This offering was barley, and it had no oils or spices. There was only a tenth of an ephah of barley, so it was a very small amount, but it was a different, very specific offering that would be put in the wife's hand. Verse 15 says, "The man shall bring his wife to the priest, and he shall bring as an offering for her 1/10 of an ephah of barley flour. No oil shall be poured upon it, and no frankincense shall be laid on it, for it is a meal offering of jealousy, a meal offering of remembrance, which recalls wrongdoing. The priest shall bring her forward and have her stand before Yahweh." Okay, after this, the priest would prepare bitter water, basically. So what they do is they get water and they would mix it with earth from the floor of the tabernacle. So they get water from the bronze laver and they would mix it with the earth. Verse 17 says, "The priest shall take sacred water in an earthen vessel," that's from the bronze laver, "and taking some of the earth that is on the floor of the tabernacle, the priest shall put it into the water. After he has made the woman stand before Yahweh, the priest shall bear the woman's head and place upon her hands the meal offering of remembrance, which is a meal offering of jealousy, and in the priest's hands shall be the water of bitterness that induces the spell." So she'd then be made to drink the bitter waters, and if she was guilty, then she would die the painful death. It's specified after this. Her body would swell, her face would go ashen, and her limbs would wither, and she'd finally die. If she wasn't guilty, then she'd get a special blessing from Yahweh in that she'd have no pain during childbirth. Verse 19 says, "The priest shall adjure the woman," that means put her under an oath, saying to her, "If no man has lain with you, if you have not gone astray in defilement while married to your husband, be immune to harm from the water of bitterness that induces the spell. But if you have gone astray while married to your husband and have defiled yourself, if a man other than your husband has had carnal relations with you, here the priest shall administer the curse of adjuration to the woman, as the priest goes on to say to the woman, 'May Yahweh make you a curse and an imprecation among your people, as Yahweh causes your thigh to sag and your belly to distend.'" So it says that Yahweh will make you a curse. That's it. It's what happened to Yeshua. Yeshua had to take all of this for us. He had to be made this particular curse. So when he drank the bitter waters, the gall vinegar on the hyssop that he was put to his lips and he drank, after that his thigh would wither, his belly, it says, distended, and it also says that he became a curse for us. In Galatians 3:13 it says, "The Messiah hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us." So people will often hear that verse and they'll say, "Well, see, the law's a curse." Well, obviously that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about him being made this particular curse. It comes from not knowing the Torah. That's why it's important. It says, "May this water that induces the spell enter your body, causing the belly to distend and the thigh to sag. And the woman shall say, Amen, Amen. The priest shall put these curses down in writing and rub it off into the water of bitterness." Okay, so the priest wrote on a bit of parchment this curse, what had happened to the woman, and he scraped the ink off the parchment into the water with the earth from the floor of the tabernacle to make the bitter waters. But in Colossians 2:13-14 it says, "And you, being dead in your sins and the uncircumcision of your flesh, hath he quickened together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses." Right.
Fucking chair.
creaking. Okay.
Maybe.
Says, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. So people look at this and they say, well, he's nailed the law to his cross. But that's not the handwriting of ordinances that was against us. The handwriting of ordinances that was against us was what's described here. The curse that was written down. The handwriting were like bills that the priest would write out. And he took those and nailed them to the cross, and he became a curse for us, took the punishment for us. Verse 24 says, he is to make the woman drink the water of bitterness that induces the spell, so that the spell-inducing water may enter into her to bring on bitterness. Then the priest shall take from the woman's hand the meal offering of jealousy, elevate the meal offering before Yahweh, and present it on the altar. The priest shall scoop out of the meal offering a token part of it, and turn it into smoke on the altar. Last, he shall make the woman drink the water. Once he has made her drink her water, if she has defiled herself by breaking faith with her husband, the spell-inducing water shall enter into her to bring on bitterness, so that her belly shall distend, and her thigh shall sag, and the woman shall become a curse among her people. Okay, so it was because of our spiritual adultery that we were subject to this curse. It says in Jeremiah 3:8, and I saw, when for all the curses whereby backsliding Israel, the house of Israel, committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a bill of divorce. So she was divorced specifically for her spiritual adultery. Yet her treacherous sister Judah, house of Judah, feared not, but went and played the harlot also. So the house of Israel were divorced, and they actually needed Yeshua to come and die, so that they were released from the law that said that the husband couldn't remarry that wife. But the house of Judah actually needed Yeshua to become a curse for them, because they had also, as that verse in Jeremiah says, they'd also been adulterous. So without that happening for them, then they would still be under that curse as well. So Yeshua was made the curse for the house of Judah too. Verse 28 says, but if the woman has not defiled herself and is pure, she shall be unharmed and able to retain seed. Verse 29 says, this is the ritual in cases of jealousy, when a woman goes astray while married to a husband and defiles herself, or when a fit of jealousy comes over a man and he is wrought up over his wife. The woman shall be made to stand before Yahweh, and the priest shall carry out all this ritual with her. The man shall be cleared of guilt. That woman shall suffer for her guilt. So it gives a husband in this case a way to be sure and be certain that the wife's not committed adultery. To have justice served if she has committed adultery. And there's a way to do it without sin, because it's all according to God's law. So he doesn't have to get angry about it. He doesn't have to, batter the wife or shout at the wife or whatever. This was designed to give them an outlet for that, basically, so they could pursue it justly. And number 6 says, Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelites and say to them, if anyone, man or woman, explicitly utters a Nazarite's vow to set him apart for Yahweh. Right, okay, this section deals with what's known as the law of the Nazir, and it's not to be confused. A Nazarite isn't like a Nazarene. A Nazarene is someone from Nazareth. This is a specific vow that was made unto Yahweh, which was traditionally 30, 60 or 100 days. Now, it involved refraining from 3 separate things. Any produce of the vine, so everything from raisins all the way to wine. From cutting the hair, when you took the vow, you shaved your head, and then from that point onwards your hair would grow. You weren't allowed to cut it, and you couldn't be defiled for a corpse either. Even the high priests were able to be around certain types of corpses, very close family members. But if you were a Nazarite, you weren't allowed to do that at all. Verse 3 says, "He shall abstain from wine and any other intoxicant. He shall not drink vinegar of wine or of any other intoxicant. Neither shall he drink anything in which grapes have been steeped, nor eat grapes fresh or dried. Throughout his term as Nazarite, he may not eat anything that is obtained from the grapevine, even seeds or skins. Throughout the term of his vow as Nazarite, no razor shall touch his head. It shall remain consecrated until the completion of his term as the Nazarite of Yahweh, the hair of his head being left to grow untrimmed. Throughout the term that he is set apart for Yahweh, he shall not go in where there is a dead person. Even if his father or mother or his brother or sister should die, he must not defile himself for them, since hair set apart for his God is upon his head. Throughout his term as Nazarite, he is consecrated to Yahweh. If a person dies suddenly near him, defiling his consecrated hair, he shall shave his head. On the day he becomes clean, he shall shave it on the seventh day." So there's a prescription that's made there. If someone dies suddenly near them and they're defiled accidentally, basically, they have to actually start the Nazarite vow again. They have to shave off the hair because the hair's become defiled, and they have to start the entire vow again. Obviously, if they were to do anything else, like eat of any of the fruit of the vine, they'd have to start the vow again, but that's an accidental case. If someone died near them, they were defiled. An example of someone who was a Nazarite was Samson. You know the story of Samson, where it says that he grew his hair basically, and that was the source of his strength. Well, when his mother conceived him, she made a vow to Yahweh that she would give her son in perpetual as a perpetual Nazarite. So that's where the idea that Samson had long hair came from, even though it says in the Bible that it's a disgrace to have long hair if you're a fella. Okay, verse 10 says, "On the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest shall offer one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, and make expiation on his behalf for the guilt that he incurred through the corpse. That same day he shall reconsecrate his head and rededicate to Yahweh his term as Nazarite, and he shall bring a lamb in its first year as a penalty offering. The previous period shall be void, since his consecrated hair was defiled." So even if it was the 29th day of the Nazarite vow or the 59th day, if someone happened to die near them, they'd have to shave their head and start all over again. Verse 13 says, "This is the ritual for the Nazarite. On the day that his term as a Nazarite is completed, he shall be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting. As his offering to Yahweh, he shall present 1 male lamb in its first year without blemish for a burnt offering, 1 ewe lamb in its first year without blemish for a sin offering, 1 ram without blemish for an offering of well-being." So it was quite expensive to have a purification from a Nazarite vow. And we'll have a look later at the Brit Hadashah reading when Paul showed that he still followed Torah by purifying himself for the people from the Nazarite vow. Verse 15 says, "A basket of unleavened cakes of choice flour with oil mixed in, and unleavened wafers spread with oil, and the proper meal offerings and libations. The priest shall present them before Yahweh and offer the sin offering and the burnt offering. He shall offer the ram as a sacrifice of well-being to Yahweh, together with the basket of unleavened cakes. The priest shall also offer the meal offerings and the libations. The Nazarite shall then shave his consecrated hair at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and take the locks of his consecrated hair and put them on the fire that is under the sacrifice of well-being." Right, so the sacrifice that was being burned, he'd actually have to shave off his hair and they'd have to burn the sacrifice above the hair that he'd just shaved off. That was part of it. Obviously all of this has a spiritual significance to Yahweh. He doesn't reveal what that spiritual significance is, but people obey it because of faith in Yahweh, because he said to do it. Basically, there's a few laws that you could speculate as to the spiritual significance of, but at this point only Yahweh knows them. Verse 19 says, "The priest shall take the shoulder of the ram when it has been boiled, one unleavened cake from the basket and one unleavened wafer, and place them on the hands of the Nazarite after he has shaved his consecrated hair. The priest shall elevate them as an elevation offering before Yahweh, and this shall be a sacred donation for the priest, in addition to the breast of the elevation offering and a thigh of gift offering. After that, the Nazarite may drink wine. Such is the obligation of a Nazarite, except that he who vows an offering to Yahweh of what he can afford beyond his Nazarite requirements must do exactly according to the vow that he has made beyond his obligation as a Nazarite." So if they vowed something extra, they couldn't say, "Oh, I've vowed something extra, but the Nazarite vow only says that I'm to do this, and I'm a Nazarite, so I'm only going to do that. I've changed my mind." They weren't allowed to do that. If they vowed something, they had to follow through on it. Now, there's a couple of Nazarites that were mentioned in the scriptures, Paul, as I said, and it certainly seems as if John the Baptist was a Nazarite as well. As it says in Luke 1:15, it says, "For he shall be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall neither drink wine nor strong drink, and he shall be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb." So the only thing in Torah that had stopped someone from drinking wine or strong drink was if they were a Nazarite. So it certainly seems to imply that he was a Nazarite, and other writings as well say that he was a Nazarite. And verse 22 says, "Yahweh spoke to Moses, speak to Aaron and his sons, thus shall you bless the people of Israel, and say to them, Yahweh bless you and protect you, Yahweh deal kindly and graciously with you, Yahweh bestow his favour upon you and grant you in peace." Now, this is known as the Aaronic blessing. Charlie can actually say this in Hebrew.
Want me to do it?
Yes, do you mind?
Okay. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yish merecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chumnecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
Okay. That's called the Aaronic blessing. Verse 27 just finishes and says, "Thus they shall link my name with the people of Israel, and I will bless them." Number 7 starts by saying, "On the day that Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it and all its furnishings, as well as the altar and its utensils, when he had appointed and consecrated them." So this was the day that the bride could stand under the hoopah. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, was a hoopah, and all of the children of Israel could then stand underneath it as the bride. It was also the new moon of Nisan, so it was the beginning of the year, and it was also the burning of, we'll see in Numbers 19, the red heifer sacrifice, which Yeshua was for us. But it consecrated the temple basically, and they burnt a red heifer at that point, and they consecrated the Mishkan with the ashes from the red heifer, made it clean. Verse 2 says, "The chieftains of Israel, the heads of ancestral houses, namely the chieftains of the tribes, those who were in charge of enrollment, drew near and brought their offering before Yahweh, 6 draft carts and 12 oxen, a cart for every 2 chieftains, and an ox for each one. When they had brought them before the tabernacle, Yahweh said to Moses, Accept these from them for use in the service of the tent of meeting, and give them to the Levites according to their respective services. Moses took the carts and the oxen and gave them to the Levites. 2 carts and 4 oxen he gave to the Gershonites as required for their service, and 4 carts and 8 oxen he gave to the Merarites as required for their service under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron the priest. So he split up the carts that were given by the chieftains according to what they needed, basically. To the Gershonites who were only carrying the light stuff or the fabrics, he only gave 2 carts and 4 oxen. To the Merari, who had to carry all of the underpinnings of the tabernacle, all the heavy stuff, he gave 4 carts and 8 oxen. Verse 9 says, "But to the Kohathites he did not give any, since theirs was the service of the most sacred objects. Their porterage was by shoulder." So they didn't have any carts, they had to carry it all. The chieftains also brought the dedication offering for the altar upon its being anointed, as the chieftains were presented their offerings before the altar. Yahweh said to Moses, "Let them present their offerings for the dedication of the altar, 1 chieftain each day." The one who presented his offering on the first day was Nahshon, son of Amminadab of the tribe of Judah. His offering: 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense. 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, and 1 lamb of its first year for a burnt offering. 1 goat for a sin offering, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Nahshon, son of Amminadab. So this was the same offering that was brought by all of the chieftains of the tribes. So I won't go through them all. There's just one that's different. It says, "On the second day, Nathaniel, son of Zuar, chieftain of Issachar, made his offering." Now in the Hebrew, the word actually implies that he was commanded to bring this offering, and it's the only one amongst the 12 that was commanded to bring it. And what the sages say is the reason for it is because Judah brought their offering first, and the tribe of Reuben weren't happy about it because Reuben was the firstborn. They came to Moses and said, "Look, we should be bringing our offering first." And Moses said, "I've been told by God that it should be done in the order that we march." And so he commanded Issachar to bring his offering next. But they all brought the same stuff. I'll just skip through to the end of that. It just lists the name of the chieftains and that they all brought the same offering. Okay, can you skip to, say, verse 80? It's around there. Okay, verse 84. This was the dedication offering for the altar from the chieftains of Israel upon its being anointed. So all of their offerings were because the temple was being anointed at that point, because the Mishkan was being anointed, because the altar was. And this was the offering, quite an expensive offering from each one of the chieftains for their clans. And it was to commemorate this event, basically. This is what they brought: silver bowls, 12, silver basins, 12, gold ladles, 12, silver per bowl, 130 shekels, per basin, 70 shekels, total silver of vessels, 2,400 sanctuary shekels, which obviously loads. The 12 gold labels filled with incense, 10 sanctuary shekels per ladle. Total gold of the ladles was 120 shekels. Total of herd offerings for burnt offerings, herd animals for burnt offerings, 12 bulls of rams, 12 of yearling lambs, 12 with the proper meal offerings, of goats for sin offerings, 12. Total of herd offerings for sacrifices of well-being, 24 bulls of rams, 60, of he-goats, 60, of yearling lambs, 60. That was the dedication offering for the altar after its anointing. And it just finishes with verse 89 saying, "When Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with him, he would hear the voice addressing him from above the cover that was on top of the Ark of the Covenant between the 2 cherubim. Thus he spoke to him." So that covering is the mercy seat. That's where God appeared before. I won't go through the half Torah. That's just talking about the conception of Samson and about his mum saying, if you give me a child, I'm barren. If you'll give me a child, though, I'll dedicate him to you for his entire life as a Nazarite. It's worth going through the Brit Hadashah reading because it causes confusion sometimes. It's Acts 21, 17 to 26. It starts and says, "And when we came to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. And the day following, Paul went in with us unto James, and all the elders were present." So it's the Jerusalem Council, as the church that Yeshua started in Jerusalem. "And when he had saluted them, he declared particularly what things God had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified Yahweh, and they said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealous of the law. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. What is it therefore? The multitude must needs come together, for they will hear that thou art come. Do therefore this that we say to thee. We have 4 men which have a vow on them. Take them and purify thyself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that those things whereof they were informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou walkest thyself orderly and keepest the law." So the purpose in him doing that was to show that he kept the Torah. He wasn't teaching the Jews not to keep the Torah. And go on to say that they've written to the Gentiles and say, you're not saved by keeping the Torah, because they'll learn it as they go on in the synagogue, basically. But the Jews that are already keeping the Torah, Paul wasn't going around to them saying, "Oh, you don't need to bother now. We're saved under grace." He's saying, "Look, you've already got it right. Obviously, keep that part. The bit that you're missing is the faith in Yeshua." To the Gentiles, he was preaching the gospel, and then they learned the rest of the Torah as they went along. It says, "As touching the Gentiles which believe, we have written and concluded that they observe no such thing, save only that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, and from blood, and from strangled, and from fornication." It's one of the most misunderstood verses in the New Testament. People just look at that in isolation and they say, "Oh, well, they wrote to the Gentiles saying that they didn't have to observe any of those things." But you've got to take it, you've got to actually read the bit where they wrote to the Gentiles and see what the reasoning was. And that's in Acts 15, 19 to 21. "Wherefore my sentence is that we trouble not them which from the Gentiles turn to God, but we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idols, and from fornication, and from things strangled, and from blood. For Moses of old time hath in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath day." So they weren't saying Moses wasn't important. They were just saying, look, don't stop them coming to God. They'll learn the rest of Moses as they go along. But if you just take verses like that one before that says we've written to the Gentiles and told them that they shouldn't observe any such thing, completely out of the context of when it was actually written, then it can cause confusion. That's what people do. Verse 26 says, "Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them." So it's obvious that Paul valued Torah, that he still followed Torah, and he went out of his way to prove it. Accusation was brought against Stephen as well, but it was false witnesses that had to be brought against him to say the same thing. They weren't teaching that the Torah wasn't valid anymore. They were just teaching that the Gentiles weren't saved by following the Torah. No one was saved by following the Torah, but they certainly weren't telling the Jews to stop following the Torah. They weren't saying to the Gentiles that they didn't have to follow it at all. They were just saying that they'd learn it as they went on. Do you mind praying?